Thanks, everyone there. Greetings to those of you online and to those in the room. I'm Paul Cutler. I'm a program director in Antarctic Sciences at the National Science Foundation. Also from NSF and participating virtually, we got Mike Jackson, who runs the Antarctic Earth Sciences program. Doug Kovalevsky, who's returned to NSF now as our Antarctic Sciences section head. And possibly also Kelly Brunt. She's now joined Office of Polar Programs on loan from NASA/University of Maryland. And she may be able to attend some of the sessions virtually as well. Thank you very much to the organizing team for putting this together. I think in any year, this is a tough meeting to put together. And with COVID adding great challenges, the team has done a real stellar job in putting this all together. I suspect that the hybrid approach will become commonplace in our collective future, with the added benefits, of course, of accessibility. I think that's a real key one. So thanks to the whole team for being on the cutting edge, I guess, testing the cutting edge of meeting organizing and paving the way to a successful future as a community. On the subject of COVID, I won't dwell on the fact that we've had 2 COVID impacted field seasons in a row. Of course, it's created great challenges to the progress of many projects. We all hope that next season will be closer to normal. But clearly there's a backlog of field projects, and it's going to take us more than one good season to clear those completely. Our primary tool for helping existing projects affected by COVID is through supplemental support to those projects, and especially that's to help grad students and postdocs. Project leads have been keeping NSF updated on those impacts. And we typically address those when the project's entering or close to entering its original final year. That's when we have more clarity on the needs. For those thinking about new projects, we've stressed in our virtual town hall sessions as well, it's still wise to think about projects that reuse data and samples that perhaps involve modeling, and in general, don't rely on a deep field component, at least in the next couple of years. The field outlook will improve, but it's going to take some time to claw our way out of this. As many of you know, we launched the OPP postdoc fellowship program, relaunched it, I should say. The next target date for those of you that didn't submit this round is February the 7th. Hopefully you know that already. Please do look at that solicitation. There's 2 sort of areas of focus, trying to get new investigators that haven't worked in the polar regions before, and then also bringing new techniques that haven't been applied in the polar sciences before. So that's 2 angles to think about. I could run through a myriad other funding opportunities at NSF, but I'll pick one example that my colleague Alan Pope asked me to talk about. As you know, Alan runs the Polar Cyber Infrastructure Program, and that itself is something that you can submit to if you're a cyber-oriented person. But also, he's keen that you pay attention to the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure opportunities. The community is actually has had a lot of success recently through that call, but we want to keep that momentum going. It's a program that serves the whole slew of people across NSF. So we want to encourage polar engagement, especially at this time when it's a little harder to get into the field. Elin also wanted me to thank all the projects that have registered their data with the USAP data center. Obviously, it's a vital component of fueling data reuse for one thing. And you'll be hearing more from USAP Data Center at this meeting. With that, I wish you a great meeting. I'll be here today. I have to make an unplanned trip to Minnesota tomorrow, but Mike, Doug, and possibly Kelly will be around virtually the whole 3 days. So thanks a lot. Thorsten?
Now, Thorsten Markus from NASA headquarters has a few slides, if I can find them.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled we're having WAIS. It's this one meeting out here that's still, partially in person, which is just wonderful. I want to introduce Caitlin Harbeck. She is my deputy. She's sitting over there. It was Colleen Hafke for a few years, who left for an NSF job. If you talk, please talk to her. If you talk to her, you talk to me. If you talk to me, you talk to her. So we are a team effort leading the Cryospheric Sciences program at HQ now. Just a few slides, some general updates. ISA 2 launched almost exactly 3 years ago, last week. And instead of having a picture of a rocket launch, I thought I'd show a picture of our pre-launch festivities. This is Natalie Portman attending the launch and hanging out with us, which was really nice. The science team will be recompeted next year. So if you're interested in doing ISA 2 science with ISA 2 data, please consider submitting to the announcement in next year. Operation Icebridge ended. All data, almost all data, should be or are publicly available at NSIDC. Please check them out. Lots of papers are coming out using Operation Icebridge, which has become a much bigger mission than just bridging the data gap between the two ISATs. Lots of radar, gravimetry data, etc., are being widely used. NISA, maybe the next big launch, next big mission for polar regions, had some technical problems, had some COVID impacts, so launch date is now summer of 2023, hopefully. And as you probably, if you read the news, we don't have a budget yet. It's annoying, it's frustrating, and I wish Congress and the Senate would get their act together and at one point give us a budget at the beginning of the fiscal year. But it is what it is. We are in good hopes, though, given the new administration, that there will be more funds for science, for climate science, and hopefully also for cryospheric sciences. So I'm in good hopes right now. I had a Roses call out for cryospheric sciences last year. It closed. It was a very specific call to study the ice shelves around Greenland and mainly Antarctica, really. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because we're trying to, well, we are doing a new process in the review process. We are doing a new approach, and that is using dual anonymous peer review when we have our panels. And with dual anonymous peer review, I mean that proposals are evaluated without their names. So the panel members do not know who wrote the proposal. And the idea was to remove unconscious biases and level the playing field better. And I talked with lots of people on panels. It's almost impossible to distinguish proposer from proposal. And that brings a disadvantage to early career scientists, to scientists who don't have the same reputation as a senior scientist, because senior scientists often get by with not so good proposals because people think, yeah, it's not well explained, but I know the person, he does good work or she does good work. And so far, this process has been very successful. It has been used in other disciplines much more frequently than in earth sciences. And we are in cryo are kind of the only call who's using dual anonymous peer review right now. And it's something that may stay, actually, because the success rates between female and male scientists have improved significantly as other disciplines you started to use the dual anonymous peer review. So it may likely become the default process, which I think is a great thing. A couple of opportunities for early career scientists. Every couple of years, 3 years to be exact, we have the new investigator program, which is always a fun program a fun panel to do, because they are basically, you can propose whatever you want to do, as long as, you are an early career scientist. And, it's thrilling to see the great ideas that people bring to the table. It's a fun call. And the other one is the student program, and I think a couple of PIs and FIs, future investigators, are here. That's every year, and that is for students only. The PI is a professor, the future investigator, the FI is a graduate student, and we realize it's mostly the graduate student who wrote much of the proposal. Again, it's very open, and it's a good call, and it means a lot for people who get a NASA fellowship in their career. There is a good chance that the amount of money will increase from $45K a year to a higher. Yeah, I know you're happy about that, Peter. Yeah, will probably increase. It came up at a higher level management meeting just a couple of weeks ago, because the amount hasn't changed for the last 5 years. So we are hopeful that this will increase. Let me skip the next slide because we still don't have a budget. Open science, we're moving towards open science. It's just a direction that we're going, and it's not only open science, it's also open source science. Sharing code and getting a DOI for the code that you develop. And we can talk more about it during the meeting, and you can talk to me about it as well, because I think it's a move in the right direction, but it's also a learning curve for all of us, for us, how we at headquarters enforce it, and for you, how do you practically do that? How do you share your code early, share your data early? So we're all in this together. I also understand that there is some apprehension in the community, because people say, I'm not a computer scientist. My code is chaos. This is how I think. And developed over time as I make my scientific progress in my research. And I get that. And that's something we have to talk about, and it's something that we are kind of, expecting that some cost increases could come from that you have more, you also budget for some programming support or something like this to make that work. In the bigger picture, though, I think if we are more open and sharing code, sharing data, it is good for the benefit of science, and I think it's a step in a good direction as well. This is the wrong slide. Oh, crap, I sent you the wrong, sorry. Oh, I gave you the wrong slide. Yesterday, last week, we had with Jen Mercer, we had a joint NSF-NASA meeting on Greenland science. So, but, it's similar. Oh, man. Too many talks. Now, so, Paul and I jointly fund this meeting, right? And I think it's great. And, building on that, Jen Mercer and I started to think about doing something similar for Greenland, because it's, WAIS has been such a success. And, one of my hopes is to, get better coordination and field work when it comes to Greenland field work. Talk to us early so that we can, coordinate efforts, see who's doing what and when and where, and, we can see, whether we can combine efforts, field efforts to make, field efforts cheaper, share twin order time or whatever it is. And also, and this is pretty much based on WAIS, these bullets, what I'm hoping is increased informal collaboration, increased synergistic science, increased data sharing. This meeting is wonderful because it's so much about talking to each other, rather than being, a speaker and audience. This is more like a group group environment, group event, which is something I really love about it. And it's also important for us because it will help us formulating future research activities. You know, what do you think, what should we be funding in the future? What are the important questions that we need to address? And what I always loved about WAIS is how early career and junior scientists are included in this event, which I think is something that's really wonderful. The last thing I wanted to say is, you know, we are serving you. And that means, you know, please talk to us, you know, let us know your concerns, issues, thoughts, ideas, etc., because, you know, that way we can, you know, do a better job with managing the program. And it's also something that in this virtual environment, it's especially the early career scientists who do not have the courage, and it should not take courage, but they do not have the courage to reach out to us. We get lots of phone calls, emails from senior scientists. We basically get virtual 0 phone calls and emails from junior scientists. And I completely understand that, because when I was a junior scientist, I would never email my program manager. So please reach out to us. You know, this event is a vehicle to do this, but also never hesitate to send us emails or whatever and pester us. You know, we'll never pester us, because, you know, we are serving you, and, you know, you're doing the science. We do nothing other than trying to, you know, send money out. So thanks again. Thanks for organizing it. I'm looking forward to the meeting. That's it.
I was hoping Thorsten would go a little shorter so we could have time for questions, but we need to move on. Sorry, Thorsten. We need to move on to the first session. Kiya Riverman will be our first session convener.
All right, hello everyone. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Kiya Riverman. I'm postdoc at Oregon State right now. And our session this morning is going to be WAIS in the community. So we have 4 talks, all of which have virtual participants. So we're going to watch all of the talks, and then let's save all of our questions and discussion for after the talks. So our first talk is going to be by Betsy Sheffield, who will be talking about community building efforts through the International Thwaites Glacier project.
Good morning. My name is Betsy Sheffield. I am on the Science Coordination Office for the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration. I'm honored to be speaking to you this morning to kick off the WAIS Workshop. As many of you know, I was the WAIS Workshop organizer for a number of years, and I am excited today to present to you a talk on community building efforts around justice, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI, within the ITGC. A little history about us. We started ITGC in April of 2018, and we had our very first science meeting in September of that year. It was a joint meeting with the WAIS Workshop. And at that meeting, we had an informal conversation on diversity and equity, which was attended by about 50 people. It's a great conversation, and it just showed the commitment to JEDI efforts do exist here within these communities on an individual basis. In 2019, in preparation for our science meeting, a team of people created a document of community values and norms of behavior. This document was circulated prior to our fall science meeting, discussed in small breakout teams in person, and adopted in 2019. It's on our website at thwaitesglacier.org under About, and then in the diversity section. In the after the 2019-2020 field season, we worked with a professional evaluator to create and conduct a survey about fieldwork experiences, and we did that in spring 2020. We got about 43 respondents out of the 80 or so people who participated in field and ship work that season. And we asked for 3 words that define the work culture of the field team, 40 people, we got overwhelmingly positive words: hardworking, collaborative, supported, inclusive, dedicated. But we did get some negative perceptions: sexist, punitive, divisive, uncomfortable, uncaring. And because of this really raised our attention. We presented this across the entire ITGC, and people were concerned about this and wanted to do something. There was also in 2020 the international focus on the Black Lives Matter movement. And we had our early career researchers across the ITGC who were really involved and engaged in discussing creating an inclusive community and improving inclusion and diversity and equity within the Antarctic sciences. So really it was a grassroots effort that formed the JEDI Council, as we call ourselves, in October 2020. We are, as you can see, a mix. We're gender diverse. We've got representatives from both the US and the UK, and a great mix of early career, middle career, and senior researchers on board, and Sridhar's cat. The initial work of this group really focused of us creating a safe space. It's about 30 people who are on this group. We had lots of conversations, defining problems, getting to know each other, creating our mission. There are many people on the group in the JEDI Council who were already involved and engaged with diversity issues, and others who are new to it but very passionate about it. As we came through these conversations, we recognize that there is so much inner work to be done around personal biases, racism, systemic cultural problems that we grow up with and don't recognize until sometime later. And that was really challenging because we had so much to do. We weren't ready to go out and make change across organizations. We had to start with ourselves. We also found that there are cultural differences behind racial and equity challenges in the US and the UK. We're just different cultures and different histories. So we set goals for our mission and our purpose of creating a welcoming, inclusive community. We want a positive work environment and culture, and that's reflected also in that community norms and values document. We coordinated with a member of the US Antarctic program who is doing something similar, JEDI work within USAP, and that's been a great collaboration. In March 2021, we had a film showing a picture of scientists for our ITGC community, and also a facilitated discussion. We had over 100 people attend the discussion, watch the film, and then about 60 participate in the small group breakout room discussions that we had on equity and all the issues that were raised in this film. This was a great way to kind of kick off our efforts and keep them moving forward. So our community of the JEDI Council recognized that we can't do this alone, and with the support of NERC and NSF, we hired a consultant to help us move forward on our goals. So we have Leilani Henry, who started working with us in April of 2021. She has led trainings of JEDI Council members. She has also done 3 sessions of an inclusive leader workshop for all of our ITGC staff. That was about 100 people of the 150 people on the project attended. And she's also been coaching the lead PIs. Through all that, we do, of course, have challenges. The JEDI work is unfunded. And so for the JEDI Council, we are all volunteering our time. We're meeting twice a month for about an hour and a half. And our priorities, though, are on our research deliverables, our teaching responsibilities, our studies, etc. The multinational component combined with the multi-institutional nature of our group means it's harder to align with policies altogether because we all have different reporting structures. And then again, in the 2 countries, our cultures are different. Also, getting the attention of the broader team about JEDI work is challenging because, again, we're competing with their research priorities. We do have engagement and workshop opportunities, but it's often the same players who've been attending these workshops. There's varying levels of effort within teams to build this community. And this darn pandemic has really made it hard to have those casual conversations about Jedi issues in the office and in meetings. We have lots of exciting work in progress that's coming up. We're doing additional implicit bias trainings and additional workshops. Leilani's doing those for us. We're going to establish a mentoring process. Leilani is working with the field teams who are deploying this season to talk about field team behavior and expectations and have them agree to what that will look like this field season. We're having conversations within our research teams, and also we're planning on publishing on our Jedi efforts, particularly results from our surveys. So we are able to continue working with Leilani in 2022. We do have this positive momentum. We're working on broadening our impact with USAP, and we love to learn from other groups doing similar things so we can really be the change we want to see across Antarctic science. Just move my video there so that you can see my final slide and all the members of our Jedi Council. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy, for contributing that. So moving forward, again, we're going to take all questions as part of the discussion at the end, but moving forward. We're good. Next, we'll be hearing from Christina Hulbe, who will be speaking about women's representation in glaciological literature and the challenge of participation.
Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tōku kōrero. Greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the beautiful city of Ōtepoti, Dunedin, where the land has long been under the guardianship of the people of Kaitahu. I want to start by thanking the organizers of this hybrid WAIS workshop for the opportunity to participate from afar. And indeed, it's the challenge of participation, although not quite in that way, that I want to talk about today. Now, some of you will know that about a decade ago, Wei-Li Wang, Simon Amini, and I published a paper on this topic. We took quite a long timescale perspective, but we also considered women's participation through the lens of authorship of papers in the Annals and Journal of Glaciology. I want to pick that data up here, translate it to the present, and apply a slightly different lens in my analysis. Now, the place we need to start is with the recognition that science is segregated by ethnicity and by gender. I'm showing you here data from Aotearoa in New Zealand, but the picture would be much the same in North America. These are government collected data. And on the top panel, I'm showing you self-identified ethnicity as a proportion of the scientific workforce. And on the bottom, I'm showing you self-identified, the proportion of self-identified female members of the scientific workforce. Everywhere where there's an economic advantage to being a scientist, science is dominated by men. And in Aotearoa and the United States, it's dominated by white men. On the bottom panel, I've colored in a darker shade of blue the subject areas in this analysis that are closest to glaciology. And you see that in every case, female participation is near or below 30%. The same would be true in North America. That 30% threshold is important, and we'll come back to it throughout this presentation. Now, back in 2010, Wei-Li and Simon and I adopted a fairly author-centered point of view. I want to change things a little bit and take more of a cohort-centered perspective in my analysis. I'll explain what I mean by that as we go along. This reflects the fact that the glaciology landscape is changing. There are more places where we might publish our papers. The community is growing. We have larger groups of researchers than we used to. A cohort point of view is possible, and this is in keeping with recent work in organizational and social psychology research. Again, I'll explain as I go along. Now, the method that I'm using is largely the same. I'm conducting a binary classification. That's too simple. Gender isn't a binary, but without self-volunteered data, there's not much else I can do. societies like the IGS don't have a history of and don't regularly collect gender identity information. So this is the best I can do. What I do is I take author lists for whole volumes of the journal, in this case, and I classify individuals based on my knowledge of those individuals, my knowledge of gendered naming systems where they exist, and then pronouns that I can find online linked to individuals. Now, there's a lot more reporting about glaciology than there used to be, so that's getting easier to do over time. I'm able to classify 90% or more of the authors in these lists. Here's the data that we published in 2010 as a time series. The blue dots are the proportion of authors classified as female in the first author category, and the green dots are the proportion that we classified as female in the authorship overall. What I want to do now is add to these time series. The most recent 5 years are some work that I've been doing very recently. In between those, in the first author time series, is some work that Laura Koenig and students at NSIDC undertook a few years ago. So I'm using the database from the original work, database of gender identity that Laura developed, and then my own more recent work to categorize, or to classify, sorry, authors in those author lists for the last 5 years. And you can see the first thing here, if we think about that threshold, is that if we look at the population of authors overall, women are not yet anywhere near that 30% threshold. That threshold is recognized in the sociological literature to be the threshold at which members of a smaller cohort are perceived as normative. Below 30%, you're an outsider. Once you reach that threshold, you're part of the game. So the first thing to see is that we're not there yet. The next thing to notice is that there's this interesting divergence between the proportion of female classified authors overall and the proportion appearing as first authors. And I want to examine that in a little more detail. So we're going to think about two things in this analysis: representation, and we're always going to keep those thresholds for appearing normative in the group or being an outsider or not in mind as we go along. So the first thing I'll show you is where the women are in these author lists. Now, I've counted up papers that have no female authors, 1 female author, 2 female authors, and so on. Those are the histograms on the left-hand side of this slide. And you can see that the most common way to be a woman in glaciology is not to be there at all, right? The proportion of papers with no female authors hovers around 40%. So there is segregation. Let's take a look at that in more detail. So in this next slide, what I'm showing you is we ignore the papers that don't have any female authors at all. We focus on the papers where women are in the author list. What proportion of the author list do they make up? So I'm showing you that in the histograms on the left, the table on the right. I'm showing you the proportion of papers that have met or exceeded that 30% threshold. And what you see is that that's fewer than half of these papers that have women. So the majority of the time, women may be in these cohorts, but they're outsiders within these cohorts. Now, 2018 was a pretty spectacular year. It certainly stands out from the others. 2017 must have been an excellent writing year, but in general, that's the case. Now, there is one way to overcome this outsider status. And the way to do that is to be involved in a paper with a female first author. So what I'm showing you here now is the proportion of female representation in female first authored papers. And here, representation skyrockets, right? 60–70% of these papers have normative representation by women. That's a pretty remarkable result, and it's a pretty remarkable contrast with these author cohorts overall. Now, why does this matter? It matters because there's intrinsic harm associated with underrepresentation, associated with being an outsider within a cohort. Now, there's extrinsic harm too. The research isn't as good, but I'd rather focus on the fact that the experiences of those individuals who are outsiders within those groups are not as good as they could be. I don't have time to talk about all these issues. This is a selection of resources. There's a lot of really excellent research on this topic. It's not mysterious, and we can learn a lot by looking at the organizational and social psychology literature. If I was going to recommend one author to you, it would be Isis Settles, who's a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan. So to wrap it up, culture matters. Women's outsider status is persistent. Papers with no female authors are doing just fine, trucking along at about 40% in those clubs. However, some groups are overcoming this. Strong cohort participation is clear in these data where women have leadership roles. So those groups have fundamentally different culture, different approaches to cohort development and to leadership, and that shows in women's participation. So I'll stop with that, and I hope that we can have an excellent discussion about what this implies about how we can change, how we can improve our practice.
Thank you so much to Christina for that. Okay, next up we will hear from Malisse Lummus, who will be speaking about best practices in glaciology, building inclusivity through cryospherecollective.org.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest in learning more.
Our mission is to share resources, foster community, and
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest in learning more about the best practices we have been developing for glaciology. My name is Malisse Lummus, and I'm a second-year PhD student studying glaciology and remote sensing with Dr. Lee Stearns at the University of Kansas.
Hi, and I'm Jessica Mejia, a glacial hydrologist and postdoc at the University of Buffalo, working with Dr. Kristen Poinar. Today, we're going to be sharing with you our work on building an inclusive environment in the cryospheric science community. We are presenting on behalf of the Mars Glaciology URGE pod. Our pod spans multiple institutions and consists of glaciologists at various stages in their career. URGE, or Unlearning Racism in the Geosciences, was a 16-week journal reading and policy design program created to help geoscientists unlearn racism and improve accessibility, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our discipline.
Currently, the geosciences are the least diverse STEM field. To make matters even worse, polar sciences are one of the least diverse subdisciplines of the geosciences as a whole. The remote environments, harsh conditions, and colonialist history of the field have created a lot of barriers to entry and retention. The field has also been slower than most to bring equity amongst genders, as was shown by Picture a Scientist. People experience subtle and overt racism and sexism at conferences, in the field, in their labs, and at their institutions. This feeling of being unsafe in so many critical work environments results in the loss of career opportunities and ultimately in a huge loss to our community. The Diversity in UK Polar Science Initiative is one of the only metrics of diversity for the cryospheric sciences that exists. These demographics show what we all know to be true, that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups accounted for only 3% of UK polar science. Scientists with disabilities accounted for only 1.8%, LGBTQIA+ for only 2%, and women for only 39%. And how is it that there isn't any demographic data for the US? With no current data, it's clear that there's a need for progress on increasing diversity. Due to the lack of diversity and the unique work environments involved in glaciology, we decided to spend our time thinking about how we could contribute to building a more equitable and diverse community within the cryospheric sciences. We need to focus on breaking barriers for people of all gender identities, socioeconomic backgrounds, disabilities, and races.
Our mission is to share resources, foster community, and advocate for change. Throughout the URGE program, we spent a lot of time thinking about what we could do to implement change in glaciology. We decided our role could be to use existing literature to inform best practices for glaciology and resources that we could then share. Our hope is that current cryospheric scientists can take this work back to their individual research teams and institutions. With this goal in mind, we are developing a website where we can share the best practices, ideas, and resources we're refining with the community. Importantly, we are not developing this website siloed from the other great work being done by numerous groups and organizations inside and outside of glaciology. Instead, all of our work should inform each other so that we can collectively make progress towards creating a safe work environment for current and future cryospheric scientists.
This is a soft launch, so we'll be adding more content to the website over the next few months. We envision cryocommunity.org to act as a hub for Jedi work and resources relevant to glaciology. This includes sharing content that's not only created by our URGE pod, but also created by others. This can include posts written by other guest writers and spotlighting other teams and organizations with similar missions. We want this to be a place for everyone to share their ideas, not just the Mars URGE pod. The informal and flexible format of this platform will hopefully allow us to get feedback and better adapt to the needs of the community.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our talk today. And thank you for the organizers for allowing us to speak with everyone. Our website is now live. Please check it out at cryocommunity.org and follow us on Twitter. We are at cryocommunity. We would love to hear feedback that everyone has. You can email us or send us a tweet. Let us know if you want to get involved, what you think about it, if we have more resources to add to our website and anything else. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the Mars URGE pod and Malisse for that. Okay, moving forward, our last presentation is going to be by Elin Darelius on Climate Ninja Goes South, an outreach project involving Legos, school children, and climate science.
Good morning, WAIS. My name is Elin Darelius. I'm a physical oceanographer working at the Bjerknes Center for Climate Research and University of Bergen in Norway, and I'm very happy to be able to participate in WAIS, even though I'm far away all over in Europe. Earlier this year, or last season, I was able to join Polarstern on her expedition to the southern Weddell Sea, and I would be very happy to chat with all of you about the exciting data that we collected, but I'm here to talk about another result from the cruise. That is the photo novel Ninja Goes South that I wrote during the expedition, and about the follow-up outreach project that led to. So Ninja, that's this small Lego guy over here, and to use him in a photo novel to do scientific outreach, that's not my original idea. It came from a friend and colleague of mine, Petra Langebrook, who brought Ninja to Eastgroup when she went there a few years ago. So she was looking for a nice and exciting way to write home to her two boys about what she was doing, what she was experiencing, and about the science they were doing in Eastgroup. So she started writing this really cool story about Ninja, who accidentally end up in Greenland and gets to join this scientist to Eastgroup. So I really enjoyed reading Petra's story, and I know she got a lot of positive feedback on it. So I thought, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do something similar from my fieldwork to Antarctica. So I asked Petra if I could please borrow her Ninja. I have two girls at home, so not so much Ninja Lego. And Petra said yes. So and earlier than in January this year, Ninja and we left for Antarctica. Well, we had to do quarantine in Germany first, but then we finally arrived on Thorsten, and we're on our way to the Weddell Sea. So when on board, I brought my Ninja and his scientist friend. Everywhere I went, together with my camera, took lots of photos, of course, and to tell people at home about what we were doing. So Ninja came with me deploying mooring, when we were tagging seals, and when I was just hanging out at the railing enjoying the scenery. And we also walked around on the ship and visited all the other scientists that were on board. And Ninja got to join us when we circumnavigated the large iceberg that broke off from Brunt ice shelf as we were there. So it was really a lot of fun to come up with the stories and the adventures of Ninja. It was very easy. I used my mobile phone and a free, or at least very inexpensive app where you can easily add those speech bubbles. The disadvantage with that is that they're saved as JPEGs, so you can't modify. If you want to just correct a small thing afterwards, you have to do it all over again. So I wrote my story, sent the photos back home to the outreach people at the Bjerknes Center, who then published the story on Instagram and Twitter. And now the whole story is available on Flickr, where you will also find Petra's original story about Eastgroup. But of course, the cruise and the Ninja story had to come to an end, and me and Ninja, we returned to Bergen, where I got lots of positive feedback from everyone around, friends, family, colleagues, and everyone basically who had read the story were very positive about it. And I also found it myself to be a very nice way to mix the adventures of Antarctic research with, and at the same time be able to tell about the science that we were doing. So together with Petra, we talked to her and we agreed that it's a real pity to stop this here. We should really take it further. So we sent in an application to the Norwegian Research Council and basically asked for money to turn our stories into children books. And much to our surprise, I think we got funded. So now we just started this outreach project where we, together with children or pupils from Climate Club at the local school and the outreach office at the Bjerknes Center and collaborators from Bergen Municipality and the school libraries, we have this book project. So the plan is to turn our photo novels into physical books. So we'll translate them into Norwegian, and the children will then peer review the material so that together we will improve it to make it maybe more suitable to children. I think we will aim for 7 to 10 years old. We will get help to do the layout, and these books will then be distributed to school libraries in Western Norway initially, and hopefully later we can spread them all over Norway. We will also prepare some form of exhibition materials that the school libraries can use to promote the books when they are ready. Of course, we plan for a release party together with the Climate Club, where they can come and visit us at the Bjerknes Center. So the story about the Ninja, which we've now renamed Climate Ninja, it will go on. And since Bjerknes Center and we recently started up lots of activity in the fjords around Bergen. Of course, we plan to involve Ninja in that activity and have him dive into the fjords to tell the Norwegian children about all the exciting things that's going on there. But that's a story that I will tell another time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elin. Okay, so now's the time we're going to open this up for questions and discussion. As a reminder for folks on Zoom, if you have a question, raise your hand, but also drop a star in the chat so we know the order of the questions. And for folks here in person, come on up to the mic. We're doing this for the first time. We're hoping to pin everyone who's a presenter up top so we can see all of our presenters. I'll actually kick us off. An observation from this session is that all of our presenters have been female, and that's also reflected in the AGU diversity session that I'll be convening at AGU this year. 7 of our 8 presenters are female. So I'm curious to hear from all of our presenters. What's your sense of, is this just 2 samples where it seems as if we have greater representation of women who are speaking about this problem and our solutions for it? Or what do we need to be doing to bring the men and other folks from our community into actually speaking about this work?
This is Christina. I could start, if that's okay. It says just please. Unmute yourself. All right, I'm unmuted. I think that makes a lot of sense. If you follow sort of standpoint theory, we are the people closest to the issues, or we are among the people closest to the issues. and we have particularly informative points of view. So I think that makes sense as a starting point. The job, of course, is to grow it. And I think to do that credibly, we need partners in this research who are on board with that that idea that to do this work, you need to have some connection or take the time to really understand the viewpoint and the experience. If you don't bring that to the work, then what you're doing isn't credible, and we're better off the way we are, on my view.
I'll just add, this is Betsy, that our Jedi Council of the Thwaites Glacier collaboration, if I'm remembering right, is about 40% men and 60% women. So we do have a good balance, although kind of most of our meetings do trend to be more women than men. I think that, I'm not sure. I think that a lot of women do speak up about it, as you said, Christina, and I don't know if there's an issue around men wanting to defer to the women to speak about it. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. So I guess that's about all I've got to say there. But we do have good participation from men on our council, which is great to see. And that's from all career stages. We've got senior scientists and mid and early careers as well.
Cool. Thank you both for that. Let's take an in-person question. I see Matt Siegfried at the microphone here.
I step away from the live stream computer for 1 second, and this is what happens. Yikes.
Art for your question.
So this is for Christina, and following up on we need other participants in these. Are you funded for this work? I mean, you're doing some really amazing research. Is it in your spare time? Does someone actually fund this research? Are our funding agencies funding us to make the community better?
Sure, Matt, that's an excellent question. Nobody's funding me to do this work. I do it in my spare time, and that's why it goes slow. It would be great to get funding for this kind of work. I think we heard this from some other, from Betsy as well, right? There just is limited resource, unfortunately. I think it would be great to have pressure from the grassroots to say this kind of work should be embedded in any kind of group-based project at the very least. I think that would be an easy way to make progress, but if we don't ask, we probably won't get.
I have a question for the panel. So are the universities, do they have any kind of, this kind of work is mainly shouldered by early career researchers and women scientists. Are the universities are they recognizing the amount of effort that goes into this kind of work? And does it go into our promotion? Like, is it figuring somewhere into our career?
I can speak briefly. At the University of Colorado at Boulder, we do, within my department, which is CERES, Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences, they are incorporating JEDI work, diversity work into your review. And so your participation on that is looked at, is regarded highly, and included in that. Funding? No, there's not funding, although there's an allowance for you to do this sort of work within your job.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add, this is Christina again, that the context here in Aotearoa is a little bit different. We have a lot of emphasis on bicultural. We are a bicultural country. We have bicultural, hopefully developing governance, so we have slightly different emphasis. I think a good emphasis that diversity is about more than gender. But I think what Betsy said is also true. We don't really have specific dedicated funding to developing ourselves. So that's a second part of this issue. It's not just about doing the research and understanding what's going on. It's giving people the resources and money and time to make change just across the board. And we don't do that either.
Since we're here at WAIS Workshop and are lucky to have Thorsten and Paul here, I wonder if we might put them on the spot to ask what funding opportunities or what recommendations would you give our community for seeking out funding for these efforts?
Yeah, well, I was on my way up. Yeah, so if you have a good idea of, if you want to do something like what Christina did or something like this, please reach out to me or, maybe to Paul probably as well. This is not something we fund through a Rose's call, because that's about science. But, there will be, I'm in good hopes that, if there's a good idea, we can find money and to support a study like this. I think that's important, completely get it. So yeah, please reach out to us. Don't write a proposal, a one-pager is just sufficient with your basic idea what you want to do and, rough estimate of how much time would be involved. And then, we can talk. As I said earlier, all the time reach out, please. And, with regard, I talked about earlier about the double anonymous peer review. And, I'm hoping that with that process and data from the Hubble Space Telescope have shown that this double-blind peer review process is generating a better gender balance when it comes to success rates for female scientists. It's a small step, I get it, but it's a step in the right direction. And anyhow, please reach out to us.
Yeah, I'll just add, one of the great things about some of the larger efforts that we are supporting is that it creates space to really focus on these issues and to add some momentum. So from the Thwaites Glacier side of things, the JEDI effort, although obviously it does rely on the great generosity of people volunteering their time to be on the committees, we are starting to support Leilani's involvement in leading that effort, and so we've done supplemental support. And so it is, to some extent we're able to do ad hoc additions to existing projects, and when, as Thorsten said, just send us your ideas, and if it isn't apparent how you could shoehorn it into an existing opportunity, we can think about other ways of doing it. And just on the theme of some of the bigger efforts that are coming along, the new Science and Technology Center award to Oregon State and many others has a very large component of effort along the growing the community diversity side of things. And so that, again, offers the opportunity for the long term to put at least 5 years, if not 10 years of concentrated effort into that. And just a lot of cross-pollination amongst the various efforts. So we're lucky in a sense that Erin Pettit is involved with both the Science and Technology Center and the Thwaites Initiative, and so we can make those connections and maximize the effort, the efficiency of it, not have multiple different separate efforts going on. So thank you.
We've had some great discussion happening on the chat portion of Zoom. I wonder if, Robin, if you would like to come on and ask your question to the group about the role of more senior folks in this conversation.
Hi, everybody. If you can't tell, I feel deeply passionate about this. And I had the honor of leading an NSF-sponsored advanced program for 5 years, and I saw it make a huge difference in my institution. But there was money behind it, and I had white men as partners, and I wouldn't have done it without senior white men as partners. So I guess, and I worry that we as a community are looking to the students and postdocs to lead this heavily. And my question is, how do we make this a whole community effort and make sure we engage the senior, mid-career and senior people in this process? You know, how do we do that?
I can speak on this a little bit. So my urge pod is a mix of people, whether it was early career or more senior scientists. And it was just really nice to have that mix. I felt like I had the opportunity to learn from them, but then I'm also getting this wonderful opportunity to come and present our work, our group's work here. And I think that's been really amazing to have the opportunity to advance my career and kind of meet new people and network here at WAIS, but also having the ability to still learn within my group and kind of take a back seat a little bit and look and see how the science is working and what we're doing as a whole and what's to be expected as a whole.
This is Christina again. I think, Robin, that mixture of different career stages is really important, right? So I certainly benefit a lot from getting a kick in the butt from younger folks, right? It's easy to get a little bit cynical, and it's great to have somebody tell me this actually still really matters. And it's great to have conversations with folks who use the same language that I do and understand the same concepts that I do. And I have to say that that's my younger colleagues, not my same generation colleagues, by and large, with whom I can have those conversations. That's the same with colleagues from more diverse backgrounds. We just have an ability to have a very sophisticated, deep conversation thanks to that mixture that I wouldn't get if I was only trying to talk with folks in my own generation.
Yeah, I would add to that I think peer-to-peer encouragement is really useful. And if mid-career and senior career folks can talk to their colleagues and that they can encourage them to get involved in this work, that it's not just for the younger generation to carry the burden of the future of climate change and these issues. It's, it's for everybody. And so everybody has a place in this, and it's incredibly important for the science to build out this community for future generations to continue studying the cryosphere. And we have to make it a welcoming place for the people who are coming into it. And that really starts at the top with people who have been in the career for a very long time, to welcome them, bring them in, and help them along, and give them a voice too. Take them under their wings, but then let them fly. And so I think those are really important things to consider within our community here.
So I think it's interesting because we've had mostly conversation on the virtual side, but one thing that we could do with in-person people and virtual is if you know of a male or are a male who conducts this type of work, just this JEDI work, could you raise your hand for the in-person people and also for the virtual people? So if you are, or if you know someone. So are you, or do you know of any males who do work to advance JEDI themes? So that's quite a bit of people. Let's look at can we see all of the virtual people? 9 participants have hand raised. Okay, so that's a significant amount of work that's being done, right? And thinking about I think it was Betsy's question, is it that those people who are doing this work, the males, do they defer to the females to bring awareness to it? Is it sort of just like, is it thought of as a courtesy, right? Like, we will let the females take care of this because, in the case of, right, gender, at least binary, it's a female problem. It could be perceived as that. But also on the other side, it is a burden to the females who are involved in giving these sorts of talks and doing this sort of work that is largely unpaid. So do you guys have any thoughts about that?
This is Christina again. I could respond to that. I think there are people who have the luxury of being able to step away, and there are people who don't. And I think that colors who chooses not to step back and who chooses to let somebody else take the lead. In some contexts, some issues that I care about, I don't have the luxury to step back because it affects my experience directly. In other spaces, as a white woman, I can step back quite comfortably and not suffer too much damage. And I try to always be very aware of that in everything I'm doing. And I think that it would benefit these groups as a whole if people who are interested and who are engaged sort of reflect on what they've got at stake and what they're willing to contribute anyway.
Cool. And I just thought I'd step in and note for a moment that we're using really binary language in this conversation here right now, but gender is non-binary, and it makes our language easier to talk in these binary terms, but there are important members of our community who do not identify with that binary classification. Gender is a spectrum. Okay, we have an in-person question.
I'm Allison. Hi, everybody. Hi on Zoom. I was just curious if people on Zoom and here would be comfortable if, like, the chat was shared, maybe, with in-person attendees. I'm not sure if it's appropriate, especially given, like, some of the content of this session. But it's just an idea. I don't know how to. I mean, you can save the chat in Zoom. Like, you can have it save at the end of your, like, Zoom session. It kind of saves to, like, a text file, and it's not great, but I don't know. But I think this is very dependent on whether the virtual attendees are comfortable having their text shared.
Yeah, that's a good question. So as it currently is, we have the Zoom chat projected up onto the main screen. If there are virtual participants who are not comfortable with that, perhaps send a private message to Matt Siegfried, and, well, you're sitting on Zoom, and we will address that. But as it currently is, we can see the chat coming in. I just made it bigger for all of you so we can at least see that a little better. Oh, apparently send it to Peter, not Matt. Okay, and yeah, we will be saving the chat as a text and can make it available.
Hi. I guess there's been a lot of discussion about sort of like marginal measures of, like, bringing more people in that identify as not in the majority of the geosciences. And I think that work is, like, very, very worthy of prioritization and discussion. But I was wondering if our panelists or anyone in the audience here was interested in commenting on sort of, like, the broader question of whether institutionalized science is an inherently colonial endeavor, you know, and that like many institutions, if not the vast majority of them, are like based on colonism and exploitation, and like the whole process of the peer review process and kind of like applying for grants and all of that is like based on privileging a very specific kind of knowledge. And I didn't know if anyone had any comments on like sort of trying to pursue these two things in conjunction of getting more people in to diversify the field, but also kind of questioning the underlying principles of the field itself.
Okay, this is Christina again. I feel like I'm jumping in a lot here, but I could not agree more. I think we have to really change the way we think about what we're doing from the ground up. I think there are a lot of excellent resources that already exist for how to do this. The challenge, of course, is that there's little incentive to change systems right now. Grassroots pressure can make a big difference. Some of the things that we've heard about from Paul and from Thorsten certainly are steps in the right direction, but I agree that they're around the edges. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, right, this country was imperfectly founded on a treaty between two different peoples, right, through a colonial process. And so this comes to mind for people who want it to come to mind all the time. And I think a core principle in making real change is thinking fundamentally differently about governance, about how we share governance structures across different groups. And if we don't, we've got a lot of culture work to do, but I think if we don't fundamentally change the way we think about decision making, for whom and by whom, it's going to be really hard to make all the progress that we want to make.
Yeah, I also really think that this is an important topic that, and I appreciate your question. The URGE group really focused on that, and we really wanted to be aware and cognizant of those kinds of structures. So, and we hope to share resources for kind of how to break that down in your lab and hopefully in your institution and just in the community as a whole. And if anybody has resources, more resources on that, we'd love to share that on the website. And we hope to have those kinds of resources up soon. So let me know. Please email Cryosphere Community or send us a tweet or something. We'd love to share those resources. We think that's really important and we're really passionate about that.
Are there any questions from virtual attendees? I haven't seen any hands come up, but please, please ask away if you have any.
Hi, thank you for your presentations, first of all. I was wondering, kind of along the similar lines of the previous question, like how should groups plan on like treading that fine line between like inclusion and assimilation when trying to include these different groups into the research done in geosciences and glaciology?
That's a great question. I don't really know what to say about that. But you make a wonderful point that it's inclusion that we're going for and not assimilation. So I'm not sure I'm not really sure. I think that we are in various communities taking small steps toward inclusive measures, but there's so much work to be done and so much to consider. One of the things we've talked about in our Jedi Council is about a mentorship program, and that's something we'd like to provide. But Jeremy Bassis has pointed out, he knows a lot about the research around mentoring, and that mentors need to have training on mentoring so that they don't cause harm, because without training, they can cause harm. And so it's just really tricky to be aware that even in your best intentions, you might mess up. And I think that might prevent people from acting when they want to act and contribute in a positive way, because of these cultural challenges too that we have. And so assimilation versus inclusion, that's a huge one. And it's not really something we talk about even in our society. So working on that within our community, there's that extra measure of challenge. However, we are getting these conversations going and they're continuing. And so the more we talk about it and the more we have a shared vocabulary, the better off we can be and grow as a community. I think that's a great point to bring up in groups. So when possible, how do we go beyond assimilation and really be inclusive? Those conversations, those dialogues, those are really key, so that it's not a big elephant in the room that we're all trying to dance around.
Thank you for that, Betsy. So we are just about out of time. We have one last in-person question that we'll quickly take, and then we're going to transition over to the poster presentations.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your presentations again. So I think we noted that it was mostly just women presenting on these issues, and now, I mean, I'm a straight white male, and I'm just thinking it would be straight out weird if I'd be standing here and being like, let the white man tell you we need more women and minorities. And I just think a lot of other men kind of have the same assumption. And I'm also an early career scientist, so I can't be like, okay, I'm doing my part by hiring a more inclusive, diverse pool of applicants or something. And I think, I mean, so far I've been thinking mostly what I can do is, you know, be active in these discussions and just keep my eyes open and see where we can bring these issues up. But so my question is mostly that, as someone who's more of a straight white male type of person, how, like, do you have any advice on how to help with these issues?
So I work in a lab I'm the only woman besides my advisor in the lab, and my lab mates are all straight white men, and they are wonderful. They are super supportive, and they are active in all of our discussions, and they have joined AWG, American Women in Geosciences, or Association of Women in Geosciences, and encourage me to join it, and they're great. They always are super supportive, and they are engaged in these conversations. And I think it's really important, just even in your own small lab group, to engage in these conversations. And whether or not you're leading the charge, at least you're there, and at least you're listening and learning yourself.
Okay, I think with that, we will wrap up this conversation. Thank you all so much for being here and being part of this. I'm so glad that our community now is having these conversations. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter Neff, who will be chairing our session on the brief introductions to the posters. And thank you so much to Wilson for running IT for that session.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the presenters in that first session. So now we're going to we had a half an hour slated to introduce the in-person posters. So if you're presenting a poster in person, if you can come up, and I'll have you line up in roughly alphabetical order. So A over here, Z over there. We'll try to keep some space. So come on up now. We don't have much time. And what we're going to do is everybody who's presenting in person has 1 minute to give your 1 minute lightning pitch for to make people come over to your poster for the poster session. So come on up, and I'll keep time. Yeah, sorry, last name come up. So Allison, I think you're first. Yeah, we'll get everybody up though. I'm gonna try to keep as much space as we can. Maybe we'll keep people around the edge there. Yeah, I don't have somebody to help me with the slides, so. Oh, Rachel Markus.
I did not have a slide.
Okay, Allison didn't have a slide, so. Can you run that for me? No. Good luck. Oh, God. Okay, well, we'll just get started. I'm juggling a few things here. So Allison Chartrand's our first presenter. I'll read your title, I think makes sense to save you the time of doing that. So Allison's presenting Examining Ice Shelf Grounding Zone Change with Repeat High-Resolution Elevation Models and Altimetry. So take it away.
Okay, sorry. So my poster is actually a little bit different from that title. I'm really trying to look at classifying basal channels and so like under ice shelf meltwater channels to see which behaviors and which types of channels may be the most important for ice shelf stability. I definitely use repeat digital elevation models as well as OIB data to kind of classify and characterize these channels, and also to see how they're behaving and moving relative to ice flow. So I have some cool maps. It's right in the middle over there, so come see me tomorrow or Thursday.
Every break the posters.
And if I might also add, I am the president of the SACNAS chapter at Ohio State, and I'd love to talk about that as well.
Great, thank you. Next up is Rachel Clark, and so I believe you have the slide here. So she's presenting evidence for simultaneous 20th century ice shelf changes of Thwaites and Pine Island glaciers.
Good morning. I'm Rachel, and a group of us have been looking at marine sediment cores along Thwaites Glacier in the Amundsen Sea. And I'll be presenting two cores in particular that show a record of ice shelf unpinning from the seafloor. And I have an example on the left there on the slide. And it's pretty interesting because it extends the record further back than the satellite or airborne data we have. So come talk to me about what we found and the interesting comparison with Pine Island Glacier. And I'd love to talk about other types of records with people who are interested in satellite or radar data as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So next up is Riley Kullberg. Flow-driven boundary conditions on the Wilkins Ice Shelf Fern Aquifer.
Yeah, so my collaborators and I are looking at this very interesting spot in the Hayden Inlet on Wilkins Ice Shelf, where there's this very sharp transition from surface ponding to sudden subsurface storage in fern aquifers, and trying to use that to think a little bit more broadly about what controls aquifer extent on ice shelves in that particular environment. And for the radar nerds, we've got some very cool radargrams of drainages and water storage under doe lines as well. So if any of that sounds cool, please come and check out the poster.
Thanks, Riley. Next up, Matthew Danielson. Durations of grounding zones still stands on the Ross Sea Outer Continental Shelf.
Yeah, so we're looking at regional seismic data on the Ross Sea. This new study uses about 54,000 kilometers of legacy seismic data, mapping out 17 grounding zone wedges. And shown here are the thickness maps. You can take a closer look at them when you come take a look at the poster. And we then calculated durations of each of these paleo still sands using the paleo drainage areas. And we have some really interesting results, and come take a look.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to advance the slides. So next up is Nicole Greco, deciphering the role of meltwater in the formation of muddy Antarctic sediments.
Yeah, so I'm looking at published data sets from the Ross Sea and also from Disenchantment Bay. It's all grain-sized data sets, and we're looking for evidence of meltwater within sediment flocculation of cores. So yeah, come check out my poster if you're interested.
Thank you. Next up, Johnny Kingslake, grain-size evolution controls the accumulation dependence of modeled isothermal fern thickness.
Thanks, Kiya. Yeah, so we at Lamont have this new project looking at fern compaction, and fern being the low-density layer of snow and ice near the surface of the ice sheet. Important for reconstructing climate from ice cores and for measuring present-day ice sheet change. And so we've been looking in this poster, we've been just playing with some simple model of fern compaction and trying to understand how the rate of snowfall affects the thickness of the fern layer. And it turns out that grain size ends up being really important, and how you parameterize grain size in there makes a big difference. And essentially, we're trying to explore that behavior and with a simple model. Thanks.
Thanks. Next up, Jessica Cromer, an observationally based investigation of covariability in the West Antarctic atmosphere, sea ice, and ice sheet surface mass balance.
First off, sorry for the extremely long title of that. To put simply, we're just looking at sea ice variability in the Amundsen sector and what that variability means for the surface mass balance of the ice sheet next to it. This is something that hasn't really been looked at in the Antarctic, and we've noticed that models aren't really getting or agreeing with the observations of sea ice that we're seeing. So this kind of led us to wonder, if the models can't get sea ice correctly, then what does this mean for their projections of surface mass balance? So we wanted to look at these connections to see what's really going on and how they're all interconnected. So we have some cool stuff, so come check out the poster. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mickey Mackey. Geostatistical simulation revealed subglacial, hydrologic, and geologic boundary conditions in the Amundsen Sea embayment. And the slide has been up for a while.
Hi, you're very close. My name is Mickey Mackay, and I will be sharing a new geostatistical method for using training images to interpolate radar measurements so that we can recover more realistic bed topography. And I will be showing you how I have applied this to the Amundsen Sea embayment and what it means for the subglacial hydrology.
Thank you. Next up, we have Merlin Ma. And I do apologize. I didn't have time to ask everybody about their names, so if I butcher it, please correct me. I apologize. Oh, sorry, your title is Laser Cutting to Collect Ice Samples in Boreholes.
Good thing, I don't think I remember that. So I'm here with, we have two co-authors here. I'm here with Joey Taugater. We're both from the University of Minnesota, and we're electrical engineers who have wandered into this wonderful and very welcoming field. And basically, we have an idea on how we could possibly get you glaciologists the ice samples, more of the ice samples that you so desire, using a high-power laser. So if that sounds exciting, stop by. Also, we are here to listen as much as tell you about the idea, so please tell us how you could use these ice samples, or if this would be something that you'd be interested in. So, please.
Thank you. Next up is Joanna Milstein, and I love your title, N = 4.
Yep, short and sweet. Every glaciologist's favorite equation, Glen's flow law. I'm just going to show you all some really simple work that we did to leverage just all the remote sensing observations that are really at our fingertips to kind of validate and calibrate Glen's flow law exponent, and really settles around 4, so kind of an interesting result. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate everybody keeping to time. This has been excellent. Next up is Naomi. I won't butcher your last name if you could pronounce it for me.
Aquat.
Thank you. And the title is Hunt Fjord Ice Shelf, Insight into a Northern Greenland Ice Shelf.
Hi everyone, I'm Naomi. So I'm here to spice up things about Antarctica and bring in an ice shelf from Greenland. So this project investigated the last Arctic-style ice shelf in northern Greenland, and we used several different remote sensing data sets to explore the breakup. Spoiler alert, most of it's gone now. So come check out my poster and you can learn about why it broke up and what you can learn from that and take to Antarctica. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mekana. If you could pronounce your last name for me, I'm so sorry. The feedbacks between ice deformation and ice rheology.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Megan Aranganathan. I'm a graduate student, and I'm interested in studying the controls on fast ice flow. So we may all well know that most of the mass loss from West Antarctica comes through these narrow conduits of really rapidly flowing ice that eventually flow out onto the ocean, calve off its icebergs, and contribute to sea level rise. Many observations and studies in the last 10 or 20 years have shown that many glaciers in West Antarctica are accelerating, so that's contributing more to sea level rise. And some recent studies have shown that one of the big controls on how quickly these glaciers are accelerating has to do with the feedbacks that occur that affect ice softness or ice rheology. So basically the material characteristics of the ice. And so I'm interested in showing exactly how what these kind of physical processes are that are causing ice to soften and thus some of these glaciers to accelerate. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Kiya Riverman. Does grounding line sinuosity drive ice shelf rifting on tidal timescales? Evidence from eastern thwaites. And your slide has been up.
Woohoo. Hi, everyone. So my talk, or my poster, is on this part of eastern thwaites that we've seen a decent bit of. Across this ice shelf, there are some prominent rift features that likely form through a combination of rifting and melting. And I look at a record of remote sensing to show how these features have formed in conjunction with embayments in the grounding line. So how does embayment in the grounding line result in a downstream rift? In conjunction, I've got a GPS survey across the grounding line that shows that at the grounding line, there's actually very little tidal variation in flow speeds. But as soon as you go even 2 kilometers downstream, we've got quite strong tidal response, particularly at the highest tides in the spring neap type cycle. So when we have really high tides, this ice shelf is pretty dramatically accelerating. We're looking at 2.5 times its background flow rate for these short periods of time. And I hypothesize that these short-term accelerations are in part responsible for this rifting we're seeing within these embayments. Thank you much.
Thanks, Kiya. Next up, Wilson. We got observing connected subglacial lake drainage at Schlesser Glacier, East Antarctica using ICESat-2 laser altimetry.
Hey folks, my name is Wilson Satoff. I'm a PhD student at Colorado School of Mines. I worked with my PhD advisor, Matt Siegfried, and Ben Smith at University of Washington to investigate a system of connected subglacial lakes in East Antarctica along Schlesser Glacier. I used bed and ice geometry to predict hydropotential flow paths, and I used those flow paths to inform and understand the surface expressions that we looked at with ICESat-2 and Cryosat-2. So please come to my poster if you want to learn more about this system and the subglacial structures that connect them.
Thank you. Next up, Elena Savage, investigating persistent polynya structure and variability at Pine Island Glacier, West Antarctica using seal-borne measurements and thermal remote sensing.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Elena. I'm working with Matt Siegfried and Tasha Snow at the Colorado School of Mines. And we've been working with these 2 different data sets to investigate persistent polynyas. And basically what our initial findings show is that salinity and temperature observations from these 2 data sets can give us key insight into key polynya properties and frontal ice-ocean processes at Pine Island Glacier. And in addition, also, our results demonstrate that we can get these measurements from seal-borne data, which give us better or more frequent measurements than available via shipborne methods, for example. So if you're interested in persistent polynyas, please come talk to me, and I'd be happy to chat with you. Thanks.
Thanks. Next up, Tasha Snow, Eastern Thwaites basal channel outflow inferred from persistent polynya variability.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Snow, and I'm a postdoc at the Colorado School of Mines working with Elena, as well as a bunch of glaciologists and computer scientists from across the US and Canada. What we're interested in is looking at these sensible heat polynyas that occur at the edge of the ice shelf where basal channel outflow occurs, bringing up meltwater and warm circumpolar deep water up to the surface where it can melt sea ice. And because it's melting sea ice at the surface, in some locations we can detect that from remote sensing. And so in the work that we're doing, we're building an automated, cloud-based, open source means of detecting these polynyas and also characterizing them. And we're interested to know how that information relates to the ice-ocean atmosphere interactions taking place in these locations. And so if you'd like to know more, discuss kind of these relationships, please come see me at my poster. Thank you.
Thanks. Next on the list, I have Eric Tamra. Are they here? Okay, so next up then is Nurbeck. And the title is Simulation of Flexural Gravity Wave Response of Geometrically Complex Ice Shelves to Ocean Waves and Tides.
Hi, my name is Nurbeck. I'm a grad student at Stanford. I'm an applied mathematician. And for this project, we model Euler-Bernoulli plate equation with spatially variable coefficients coupled with shallow water equations. So we try to sort of model the interaction of ocean waves with ice shelves. And we prove numerical stability and accuracy. And for this workshop, I run the simulation on Thwaites ice shelf. So please come check it out.
Thank you. Next up, Thomas Teisberg. Let's see. Ice thickness interpolation with physics-informed neural networks. We have a slightly different title here. No worries.
My bad. That's my fault. Anyway, either way, our poster's about the same thing. So this is out of some work I did with Mickey Mackay and, of course, my advisor, Dusty Schroeder. We are basically exploring physics-informed neural networks as a tool for geophysical interpolations, and we think they have some really promising properties. What we look at specifically here is looking at the inverse problem of doing mass conservation-based interpolation and incorporating additional physics-based or geophysically based constraints on that to see if we can get more realistic results out of that. So if you're interested in the method or our results applied to a particular glacier, come check out our poster.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hannah, the impact of elevation SMB feedbacks on the evolution of Thwaites Glacier, West Antarctica.
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah Verbancourt. I'm a graduate student with Matt Siegfried at Colorado School of Mines, but this week I'm presenting my undergraduate thesis work that I did with Alex Roble at Georgia Tech. So we were interested in the connection between the surface mass balance and elevation relationship at Thwaites Glacier and how it affects the projected future stability at Thwaites. So we created an equation that we implemented into ISSM that represents the feedback, and we found some pretty interesting results, including some increased ice mass loss. So if you want to talk about ice and climate on Thwaites, I'm your guy. You can see my poster tomorrow.
Thanks. Looks like last we have Lee Wellhouse, the Automatic Weather Station Network.
Hi, I'm Lee Wellhouse. I'm with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Antarctic Meteorological Research and Data Center. Our automatic weather station network is in the 40th year of constant use. So we have weather stations throughout Antarctica and basically come here to say, hey, we have data if anyone wants to use it, or if there's things you need from weather station network. We'd like to be a community resource on top of our own work. So yeah, we're always looking for input on what people need so we can best serve the community while also doing our own work.
Great. Thanks to all of the in-person poster presenters for giving that little overview. So the posters will be up, and you'll be able to go check them out at all of the breaks and in the evenings. And we are ahead of schedule now, so we're, unless there are any other questions or things people need, we can move on to the first coffee break. Yeah, we're back at 11 o'clock, so we've got 35 minutes. So thanks, everybody, for a great first session.